push the button.
Yes, that push the button. Yes. Greetings and welcome to the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track author interview series. I am joined today
Wow,
by what's that?
that's a title. It's like 4 colons. The
Yeah,
DragonCon colon, Urban Fantasy colon. Writer interview track. There you go.
Yes. And we're very happy to be joined today by Ben Aaronovich, who writes one of my favorite urban fantasy series. And yeah, and I'm very excited to be getting to speak to you again. And the last time we spoke was it was in January of 2023. So not quite a year and a half, but, getting there. So it's really nice to actually see you again as well. Yeah. So my first question for you, and it was something I didn't ask you the last time that we had, our rather lengthy interview, but because I did ask you a number of things, but I did not ask that what was it that actually drew you to urban fantasy, as a genre for yourself to write in? What was the appeal for you?
Yeah, well, this is quite interesting because I've noticed that with authors these days, there's a lot more driven kind of like people go, I am writing this and I'm going to do that, and I don't approach my work in quite that way. I mean, I'm aware of genre because you've got to be aware of genre when you're writing in a genre. I was aware of urban fantasy, but basically it was I wanted to write a book, and I like crime and science fiction and fantasy, and I couldn't be bothered to write 2 books. It was that simple.
Okay.
It was that simple, really. So I had another idea, which is a kind of science fiction crime, a sort of near future science fiction crime. But the trouble with that is it goes out of date so fast, especially computer technology, that by the time you finish the book, everything you've written is out of date. And also, I'm not good enough. I'm not kind of like knowledgeable enough about things like computers to actually convincingly write about near future computers without lots of people these days kind of sending me emails going, I think you'll find that 2 terabytes is not really considered a large memory cache, and so I thought, right, it'll be a fantasy because then no one can argue with it. Your magic system is wrong. No, it's my magic system. It's perfectly fine, thank you very much. So I sat down and I had this idea knocking about. You know, as a writer, you tend to have ideas knocking around in your head all over the place. And I just sort of like grabbed hold of it and said, "Ha! You will do." And I sort of banged it like a fish on the table until it's submitted. That's how I remember it, anyway.
Well, I guess it worked, right?
And then basically, because I was working full time and I had a teenage son, so you can imagine my time is like the amount of time I actually had to write is quite small, and so therefore there was a lot of kind of like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, typing it which you can tell if you read the book. You can go, yeah, Ben was at 4 o'clock in the morning when Ben wrote that. I looked through it. That was a 4 o'clock in the morning idea. That was another 4 o'clock in the morning idea. That was, oh shit, I need another 200 words. Well, I'll just throw in this thing. So, I've been getting better. There's less of that in my book. Although, to be honest, some of the appeal of the books, I think, is that they're kind of, sometimes Peter will just come out with some totally random comment about architecture or something in the middle of a fight or something. And I think that's part of his charm. And he keeps doing it. I mean, as a character, he keeps insisting on sort of like going off on tangents and stuff. So,
well, and I think you're right. I think that's part of his appeal. I mean, I think that it helps readers identify with him as, okay, he's a regular guy who can do magic, and there's a lot to be said for that, because not everyone within the genre can or meets that particular.
I was aware of the genre things that there were certain tropes I didn't want to do. Right, and not that they're necessarily bad, but there were a lot of them that I felt I didn't necessarily want to do. So I didn't want to have people who can do magic by birth because they're born magical. I didn't want a very rigid masquerade. I wanted a kind of slightly porous masquerade, so that kind of like people are vaguely aware there's something going on, but they don't have any proof. And I had these kind of ideas that I drew from my own genre knowledge, and of course TV tropes, which is a very useful resource for writers. Especially when you want to know what's kind of like really been done to death. Like there's the whole dead horse. There's the flogging the dead horse trope, right, where you just go through all the tropes that are being done to death. And if you can't think of some way of making them good, again, you just need to avoid those tropes, really. And that's kind of useful. But in the end, it was just really basically written in a kind of. I wrote the first 4 or 5 pages, and I went, fuck me, this is going to sell, because this was The Voice. And The Voice is what really you read a series of books for, is usually The Voice. I mean, you like the world building, you like the plots. Occasionally I will solve a mystery without too many plot holes. But really what I read, look for in a book is like you hear the voice, that voice that just keeps going, I want to go back and spend time in the company of that person. So once I'd got The Voice, I knew it was going to sell. And then it was a question of writing the book and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But urban fantasy, yeah, like I said, couldn't be bothered to write 2 books, basically.
Right.
And they think I'm a genius. They go, "Oh, you're a genius! You should go." People who don't know, like, the Dresden Files or something, they'll go up to go, "You're a genius! You've invented this new cross-genre thing." And I'm going, "Yeah, it's only been around for what, I don't know, 50 years, 60 years." The Spraggler Camponi started it like 50 years ago. 60. My God, it's more like 70 years, isn't it? Jesus, but
Right. Well,
people don't know that. Mundanes, as we snobbily call them, don't know that. Right. I'm perfectly happy to take the credit. Yeah, absolutely, totally nailed it. Cross genre.
That's right. Me. Well, and I think that that's a credit to you, though, because people are spotting it as being something different and original. So even if the genre itself has been around a lot longer, I think for people to say that, it's a compliment.
When I was writing the books, right, and like I worked in a bookshop, so you're exposed to books, and people kept on coming up to me and I went, "Oh, I write this book. It's about a cop that does magic." And they went, "Oh, like the Dresden Files." And I went, "Who?" And like, "Oh, shh." And so I read the Dresden Files. I'm like, "Oh my God!" Right, and then there's a book. There's actually a series called the Black London books, which are about a cop, cops in London. And I thought, Do you mind? I'm trying to write here. Can you not get in my way? And there was a guy called Mike Shevden, who's a very good writer, came in right to hand, because you do this when you're a struggling writer. You go into bookshops and you try and persuade gullible people like me to order your books. And he said, "I write this book." And I said, "Oh, what is it?" He said, "Oh, it's a fantasy, but it's set in the real life. It's set in Covent Garden. It's called 61 Nails." And I was like, "You bastard, get out of my shop. Get out of my shop." No, I didn't. I mean, it's a good book. I stopped it. But it's like, I thought, help.
Right. Everybody's taking my ideas. Yeah.
It's like everybody's I was like fresh books I'd never heard of would turn up, and I'd be shelving them, and I go, "Oh, this looks familiar." And I was thinking, I'm never going to finish this book because I'm just going to give up. But fortunately, I didn't. But I was aware of the competition. Let's just say that.
Right. Yeah, there is some. That is true. Oh, yeah. You've got the series so far with the 9 full length novels, some shorter novels, some novellas. And then the 11 graphics. But what would you say are some of the challenges of maintaining a long-running series like that?
Well, you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to say, and you've got to be honest with your publishers as well, especially if it's successful, because they have expectations. So the readers have expectations, your publishers have expectations. You have to say to yourself, is this going to be any good? Is the next one going to? Do I have an idea? Usually, do I have an idea? I start panicking about halfway through a book that I don't have an idea for the next book, and then usually the next book will usually, as a form of procrastination, an idea for the next book will turn up, and so I go, oh, thank God for that. It's still another book. I'm still under contract for at least 2 more books, you see. So I can't, it's not like I can just go, oh, I'm not going to write any more books. Right? I'm not allowed to. I'm literally under contract to write 2 more Peter Brown books. But fortunately, he hasn't let me down. He hasn't let me down. London hasn't let me down. People, things like the Foxes and Beverly and Nightingale, none of these people have let me down yet. So, but I always do start a book thinking, what if this is the one that starts the inevitable decline in quality, leading to despair? But hasn't. Well, touch wood, it hasn't happened yet.
Right. I can imagine that is in the back of your mind. Maybe not constantly, but it must be there at least.
There's this terrible thing where you binge read. You must have done it yourself. You binge read. You find someone you really like, and they've got like 14 books, and you binge read, and you get to book 9, and you think, oh, I'm not really enjoying this as much as I used to. And you think, is it me because I've just read 8 books by the same author all in one go? And it's really unfair on the author because, of course, it takes us. Well, I mean, it takes me 6 months to a year to write a book, and it takes me about a day to read one. So it's like
right, yeah. It's kind of an apples and oranges unfair comparison thing. Yeah.
Read 9 books in a row, you notice all the things like, oh, they're constantly, people are constantly tussling people's hair, or they're shrugging one shoulder shrugs and things like that. Little quirks that writers have, and they don't realize they're doing them because it's spread over such a long time. And I'm sure there's plenty of for example, there's like at least 8 people called Zach in my books. I don't know why the word name Zach is so appealing. People have blue eyes, and I'm like, oh no. I got a note from the book I just literally handed in. It said, why are there 5 people with curly hair? Oh, okay. That's so I went and took out 4 of the people with curly hair, and I was like, straight hair, curly hair, mohawk. I mean, what? It's like, but fortunately, I've got a very good editor, so he goes, yeah, you've done this 8 times. You've done the same joke 9 times, Ben. That's 9 times, 8 times too many. Oh, it was such a good joke.
Yeah, I know. We had a discussion amongst some people the other evening during an author presentation, actually, about whether people will like to read things in a series all at the same time, or like one right after the other, or spread them out. And I'm actually in the latter camp. I prefer I like to kind of have time in between, because for me it gives me also time to think about the ones that the last one that I just read, then read some other things in between, and then pick up
I can't help myself. It's like biscuits, some people, this always amazes me, can have a whole packet of biscuits in their house, and it lasts more than a day, to me, which is amazing, because as far as I'm concerned, to eat one biscuit is to basically eat the entire packet of biscuits. It's inevitable. You're going to go back and go, one more. There's going to be no packet of biscuits left. You're going to go, oh, I ate a whole packet of biscuits. And I'm like that with books. If there's another book to be had, I will probably, read the next book straight away. And that's terrible. And I do that thing, and I say, look, you don't like it when people do this to your books. You're doing this to other books. And I go, yes, but I'm not going to tell them. Sorry.
Right. Well, there you go. You're not going to email them and say, hey, why'd you do this? Yeah.
Eli Griffiths is safe. I'm not going to tell her that I read all her books all in one go very quickly.
Right. Now, you had mentioned just a few minutes ago about the fact that London has not let you down in terms of, being able to come up with ideas and everything for the stories. And first, I want to preface by saying, when last we spoke, I had already read your whole series. I mean, all of the, not the graphic novels. I'm sorry to say I'm behind on those, but we made what's that?
Can I just make this point for people, right? The graphic novels are not compulsory.
Okay, there you go.
Novels, you don't have to read them. some people
I'll remember that. So,
people feel that they're being forced to do something they don't want to do. Nothing, what they grandly call the meta plot is going to happen, which will not be explained in the books, will happen in the graphic novels. Okay, you might get references back to them, but it's just, I just worry about that because some people get very and they won't
right. Being afraid they're going to miss something major.
Yeah, that kind of fear of missing out thing. So,
right.
I want to assure you won't.
Okay, I will feel good about it. So check them out at some point at my leisure. In other words,
at your leisure, probably at the library. That's fine.
Now, I got to come to your lovely country for the very first time last year.
Okay.
In May, so I had already read all of the books, and so I'm going back and thinking about it, over a period of, a couple of years anyway, and now I'm thinking, well, I kind of, after having been there, and we're actually getting ready to come back again in just 10 days.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, and I thought, maybe, I kind of wish that I may need to go back and read them again, just because because a lot of the places that you talk about and all of that, they are real actual places. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Some of them have gone. It's called The Curse of the Ben Aaronovich book. In that, if I write about a place, sometimes they just vanish like the next day. They literally planning permission comes through and they're demolished. And I'm like, you couldn't wait till the book was out. You literally
right. Because then you get people going and looking
and they go, that's not what it looks like. Well, it looked like that when I wrote the book. Okay, go on Google Maps, use the time search thing. Go back to 2014. That's what it looked like.
Right.
It's gone now.
But certainly within the series, London itself is a character. I mean, in the book when it comes, in the series, and was that something that was intentional on your part, or was that something that just kind of grew organically from what you were doing?
It's kind of like the humor. I've tried writing serious books and it doesn't stick. And London being a character, I think it's just a function of the fact that I'm a Londoner and I'm writing set in London and I love London and I like lots of places, but London is my home. And I think it's a combination of the humor that makes London the character. And it's a very London sense of humor, and so therefore, and Peter's a very London boy, so it just kind of like, yeah. I mean, I'm never really sure what people say. Like, I just describe it as it is, and occasionally as it isn't, because sometimes things aren't in the right place. Like in Moon Over Soho, I wanted it set in Soho, but I found this really interesting lingerie shop that I wanted to have a scene in, but it was in Notting Hill, so I moved it to Soho. You see, you can do that when you're a novelist. You can just
That's right.
I will have that. Move it over here. Ha ha.
I'll have to remember that if I'm ever, if I'm in one of those two areas, I'll have to keep that in mind.
I just move these things out, and occasionally, about 90% of it is real, and then I make up about 10% of it. Like Sky Garden in book 4 is completely made up.
I was wondering about that because I hadn't heard anything about it.
There was a Gate estate in that location. It was a very famous estate, but there wasn't like a great, Gothic garden tower in the middle of it looking like a Orthanc. That wasn't, that didn't really exist.
Especially not with a sentient machine being stored there.
Yes.
Now, do you enjoy? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, but the basement of the I couldn't even do the basement of the British Library. It's true. It was just fantastic, and I couldn't even do all the stuff that's under the ground. Like I had to leave at least 2 chapters worth of other stuff out of the third book because I just thought, no, we've been underground too long. We've got to get it. This chase has gone on for 3 chapters. It cannot go on for another 2 chapters. And I'm like, oh. And there was going to be a bit where Reynolds goes, for God's sake, Peter, how much bloody underground does this town have?
Right. It's like, well, if you really want to know, right?
So that's why those are the aficionados. That's why the mail rail didn't make it into the book.
Ah, okay. All right. Well,
which is a visit. You can visit the mail rail now. You can ride on the mail rail. It's apparently is fascinating.
Oh, that is interesting.
So
We'll have to look into that while we're there.
Because it's there are lots of thing about London is there's lots of stuff away from the kind of normal routine things that you can go and do, where you won't be stomped to death by crowds of tourists.
Right. Yeah.
And or charged, exorbitant large sums of money for, and so I always recommend people have a look around. There's all sorts of YouTube guys like London You Don't Know and all that kind of stuff. Have a look at those. You might find stuff that you might find interesting. That's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Right.
And, I just recommend how we got on this tangent. Anyway, so that.
No, I appreciate it because that's good. That's good advice, and for anyone who watches us.
I promise you, I am not paid by the London Tourist Board to say things like this. Although, if the London Tourist Board is watching, I wouldn't mind. Thank you.
That's right. You would be a good consult for them. So yes,
please pay me for this.
Now, do you enjoy doing research? And if so, what are some of your favorite topics that you've had to do?
Well, I enjoy torturing my German fans by asking them for pieces of information about how you say German. That's always a laugh for me because I like Germany and I'm learning German, but it's a different culture, and so therefore, when you're writing there, you just don't know stuff. So I love asking these kind of obscure questions like, "What a man from Hamburg? Would you be able to tell someone was from Hamburg by their accent?" And then they just have these long Twitter arguments amongst themselves about whether it's a accent, and you just learn so much, right? Because it's always best to go for research. The hierarchy is you always want to go to actually a person, right, who's done it, right? So you want to know about piloting, you go to a pilot, right? That's and if you can, I mean, obviously historical stuff that's a little bit difficult, but you always want the primary sources as much as possible, and for that, Twitter's very useful, and the internet is very useful for finding people. I mean, you have to be careful, and you have to be skeptical of your sources, and but it allows you to have a multitude of inputs, which I find very interesting. So you get a multitude of points of view. People go, no, Gunther's a terrible name for a guy born in 1972. Well, my uncle was called Gunther and he was born in 1972. And you just get these kind of discussions, and you learn stuff from listening to things like that. Like, for example, I didn't know there's a whole generation of Eastern Germans who have names like Elton after Elton John, named after Western pop stars, because their parents did it as a kind of act of defiance during the 60s and 70s, you see. And then, of course, now it's the walls down and everything, and they're all called Elton and, Paul, Ringo.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I mean, you just go, okay, right, fine. It's like, but I didn't know that. That's not something I know. And I love research. I like finding out things I don't know. My aim is to put things in my books that aren't in the Wikipedia page, which was much easier about 10 years ago. Like, Wikipedia really has got a lot better in terms of like its volume and also its accuracy. It's got a lot better than it used to be. I mean, there are some things you just can't get off Wikipedia. Anything slightly controversial, there's just usually some kind of war between people rewriting it. So politics and stuff, but things like trains, right? So you can get so much detail on like steam trains from Wikipedia, right? But I try and get more stuff than you can get online. So because I feel I should, I don't know. And so I go to local history libraries and stuff like that. And they always have great books on, the role of trams in Hackney, 1917 to 1923, that is not going to be in Wikipedia. It's like, who cares, right?
Well, obviously you do, but yeah, okay. Now I know what you mean, though.
Yeah, but you can really always find something that's in there, but you've got to go looking for it, and that's fun. And also, of course, it's sort of pretend working because you're not you feel like you're doing work, but you're not really. You're reading books, which you do for fun anyway.
Right, right. And I've heard, lots of authors talk about kind of falling down a rabbit hole once you get started on, one topic that ends up leading to another, and then you just keep going, and then you're like, wait a minute, what was I in here for in the first place?
I have written an entire book, literally amongst our weapons, was basically that. Someone told me about the silver vaults, and I went to the silver vaults, and I looked down there, and I went, "Oh, I have to kill someone down here." And then, the silver vaults, what's their history? Where they come from? Silver crafting in Britain, and you just slowly, bit by bit, you just kind of accrete knowledge, and you just find yourself telling a story. And it went to the Spanish Inquisition. Because of course it did. Don't know why.
Of course, yeah. Now, turning to your most recent book in the series,
Yes.
of the Winter's Gifts.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't know you salt in Wisconsin. I'm sorry to all Wisconsinites. I'm sorry. You salted. You salt. I know. I'm mea culpa. And you have parking lots, not car parks.
Oh well. Oh, they'll get over it.
I blame my copy editor.
There you go. Now, within that story, you did incorporate Native American lore into your magic system and had to kind of meld them together in a way to, for it to make sense in the series. And was that challenging? I mean, not that you got into,
Well, I mean, you have to be very careful because when you're talking about like with African religions, you see, these things are very tied up. They're not just kind of like fun mystical magic systems like, go down your pagan bookshop and get a book about it. These are actually practicing beliefs in the same way that Christianity and Buddhism and religions are. But unlike Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam, someone has attempted to wipe them off the face of the earth, and so therefore you need to be a little bit sensitive. And I don't normally use that word in terms of writing, but you need to be careful about how you encroach upon them. But at the same time, I think it's wrong to ignore them. So when I just chose Bayfield basically as my town, I rub the serial numbers off, but it's basically Bayfield, right? You look at the map, and there's the Red Cliff Band reservation just up the road. So I couldn't ignore it, so I had to do research on it, and then I learned all about the Ojibwe and everything, and that was very interesting. And then they sort of infiltrated into the plot at that point. So
okay.
I went, aha, okay. Well, then they kind of suggested the story, and I thought it would be fun to do a reversal of the classic Indian burial ground thing where it's like the evil is coming up because they built a house on an Indian burial ground. But I wanted to tease you by making you think that's what the plot was going, but it's not going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm deliberately quite vague about who the boy on the island is and everything, so that I'm not treading on anyone's religion, basically. It's in the same way that he fits into my cosmology, right?
Right.
And he might be available for somebody else's cosmology if they want him, but they don't have to have him. I'm not imposing him on their cosmology, if you see what I mean.
Right. He could just as easily appear, he could be a friend of Beverly's for all we know,
Yes. Well, I mean, he's a Genius Loci, so he's like, basically, I don't say of what, because one of the great things about Reynolds is she doesn't know enough to ask these questions. Right, she doesn't know enough. Like Peter would be going, "Oh, who are you? What's that? Oh, what's your game?" Like, get away from me with your questions. But Reynolds is, at that point, busy as well, quite busy on her own, trying to manage quite a difficult situation, and so therefore she doesn't have time to kind of like pry into the ifs, whens, and buts.
Right.
So that was good, and so and also I read quite a lot of FBI agent goes to small town to solve mystery books as kind of research, and they always fall in love with a cowboy. So like he's always like wearing jeans. He's always got jeans and a hat, and they like swoon over this kind of rugged outdoorsman. So I thought, I'll make him a weather guy from Madison.
Yeah, that was pretty original. I like that. Yeah.
And I thought that would be fun. Since we're dealing with the weather, I thought I'd make him a weather guy, and then he can go, "This is not natural. Weather doesn't want to through the book." And then I made him have Ojibwe parents, because I thought, that gives him a connection to the local thing, and he can be the sort of interpretive character. And that worked out rather well. I like the idea of him. And he's about as spiritual as a fish. So,
right.
And I thought that would be quite nice to go against that cliche, because the Native American character in these things is always like, I felt the thing. No, he's not. It's like, no, I want barometric pressure. I want to know what the Pascal ratio in the upper atmosphere is. That's him, right? And I thought that would be a fun kind of contrast.
Yeah, he was aware of the traditions, but not
he was taught
not necessarily, that they weren't personal to him, in other words. So
yeah, I mean that was the research, and I did have a what they call, I hate the word, sensitivity reader. I just think I don't like the word sensitivity reader, because it implies that what you're trying to do is avoid annoying people, which you should be doing anyway, right? But really, I have a police sensitivity reader in that case, because what I think of them as an authenticity person. Right. They check you're not talking bollocks. A non-bollocks talking person. I don't have a word for it really. Because
I get what you mean though. It does call up a different idea, especially when the term gets used a lot. Then it starts to mean less too.
Yeah, and you should always pay them, whatever you call them. You should always pay them, because it's
right. Whatever they're called, pay them.
Some people want these services done for free, and you shouldn't. So if you're asking someone to read your book and put in some hours on it, you have to fork over some readies, as people will say. So
that's now you got to spend a lot more time, or the reader does, and I suppose you did too, with Kimberly in
Kimberly.
Yes, and which I think everybody enjoyed her when she first showed up. And then for this, for her to get basically her own story, I know that Abigail is also one of your favorite characters. And I know, what do you most enjoy about writing those two? I mean, what is it that appeals to you about their characters that make them so much fun to write?
I like Kimberly because I mean she's very straightforward, and she's got this very, very fundamentalist Christian background. Her mum's like a very fundy, and but is quite humorous with it. Their family's quite humorous with their fundiness, and I liked finding. I had to find a balance, because the trouble is, if you write Christian fundamentalists or fundamentalists of any kind as they actually are, right, as they actually talk, it sounds like you're taking the piss. It just sounds like you're taking the piss. It sounds like you're writing, he's just writing a stereotype, dumb, fundy character, Clitus, inbred Clitus. You just think like people get really annoyed with you. So I thought, I can't do that. I have to find a way into her character and her humor. I mean, it's me, so like humor was going to come into it soon. But I quite like that. So she is sincerely religious, but she's seen stuff, and so therefore she has integrated that into her belief systems. So she still believes in God and everything, but she understands that the world is more complex than that, than the sort of simple kind of black and white thing, but without really letting go of her fundamental beliefs, which have been drilled into her by her mother. And her brother is a pastor who keeps suggesting that she brings back a woman just to see, because like her mum's getting kind of desperate that she's not married. And things like
right.
So, and I mean, you have lots of, and then you kind of come up with that whole stuff about how her mum starts off with she has to marry a Southern Baptist of a particular kind, of their kind, and then she's like Christian. Now she's down to kind of monotheism, any kind of monotheism.
She's revising her expectations, yeah.
And her brother suggests that she brings home a Christian lesbian lover and sees if her mum will buy into that one.
Right. Give it a try, see what happens.
And he's the pastor of the church now, so it's like. And I just thought, once I had that kind of dynamic, the family dynamic, once I had that feeling about. And once I've done quite a lot of research on where actually FBI agents actually come from, or how people become FBI agents, that was very useful. I actually phoned up the FBI. They actually have a service where you phone them up and ask them questions. So that's what I did. Ask the FBI, and they explain what how she would have been recruited, how she would have applied, what she would have done, what the up and down the job schedule would have been, what department she probably would. They're very nice. It's very, very handy, and I wish the Metropolitan Police would do that. It would make my life a lot easier.
I'm sure it would, yeah.
But I just love the idea of the FBI actually. I mean, because of course they do, because they have to deal with Hollywood, right? So they have people and they're agents, right? I think they rotate them through, right? Where you have to sit there and answer stupid questions from writers. Yes, no, we don't use a gun in that situation. No, But the thing I learned from my research was that FBI is very focused on sources. They're very focused on intelligence sources. So therefore, they expect you to go out and make friends with people. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. So like Peter, she's always looking to network. And I thought, oh, that makes much more sense now. They're looking to network. And so in some ways, a little bit too much like Peter. And I had to pull back a little bit on that because it was the beginning. You don't want, when you're writing characters, the tendency is for them to blur together if you're not careful.
Well, I know what you're saying. I mean, but that maybe her tactics are kind of the same. But I think you're safe on making them too much alike. I don't think that they are at this point. I mean, I think they're
very hard. I mean, I choose characters that are very distinctive in their own right. So
right.
Abigail, like 13-year-old London girl, is like not going to be like Peter, despite having a very similar background. Is nothing like Peter because she's just from a different generation and talks this incomprehensible multicultural London English, which is just, no, I don't understand that. Sorry, I'm too old. So I had to study that. That was like, and I'm not getting it right, but you only have to kind of make a kind of a hint towards it. You're never going to get it right because by the time you've written the book, it's changed. That's the trouble with slang. It's changed. So you always risk sounding like you're totally groovy, man. I'm a hip cat.
Well, Abigail's great. Whatever you're doing, it works just fine. I think.
She's very funny because she's just perpetually angry, and so she's always like, she writes in the first present tense, which makes her distinctive anyway, which is a pain because I keep forgetting I'm writing in the present. I'm not doing that again. That's too much effort. But she's also perpetually angry, so she's always looking out of the book at the reader and going, "I know what I'm talking about. All right, like that." And that kind of gives her a different flavor. And then Reynolds is kind of much more like, I'm very clinical, I'm controlled, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, I'm going to tell you why I'm doing it, I'm going to do it this way, because this is the way we do things in the FBI, and because this is an intelligent way, right? And then the good beauty of that character, of course, is things go wrong and everything falls apart, she has to improvise, and then the next character in the book that's coming out in September is a straight up pastiche of P.G. Wodehouse, and so therefore it's a completely different voice in some ways. Especially since it's 1920s, you see. So,
yeah, that one's very interesting. When I was reading the summary of that, was what that was about, I said, "Oh, this is going to be good," because I'm thinking of him and Nightingale together. It's like, oh, that's going to be something else. Now, if you could take Kimberly, or Abigail, and put them in some other. Like they would make a guest appearance in another urban fantasy series, whether book or television show or whatever. Where do you think that they would have the most fun? Where would they fit? Or where would they wreak the most havoc?
Well, someone said, "What house would Peter be in Hogwarts?" And I said, "Peter's not going to be in a house in Hogwarts. He's not going to submit himself to that hierarchical."
Right.
Abigail you might get her in. If you got her at 12, stuck her on the train, got her there. But you think Hermione was a handful. You nothing compared to what Abigail would be like. So that's Harry Potter. I don't know. I don't know, because you see, the thing is I've got the wrong kind of brain for that, because for me, magic systems are very distinct, and so therefore you have different power levels. Like Dresden, the power level in Dresden is much, much higher than the power level in my books. And the same, I think, of the Druid, the Iron Druid books, the power levels are all very different, and so therefore, if you put Nightingale in that, like Nightingale's the most powerful wizard in the world. If you put Nightingale in the Dresden world, he's nothing. He's like he's got no powers at all, right? If you scale him up to where he is, he's just like, I am God, and I will smite mountains, you know. And so therefore you have a lot of problems with you. So when you say someone goes into somebody else's world, it's I think it's much more fun to put them in non-urban fantasy worlds.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
I'd like to put Abigail and a fox into Brokenwood, which is a New Zealand.
Oh yeah, I love that show. That's a great show.
Because Fox is a band. Fox is a band in New Zealand, and so therefore the idea of Abigail sneaking her fox around it just appeals to me.
Oh, that would be great.
You know, so I kind of like, when I think of those sorts of things, that's what I'm sort of thinking. Also, yeah, it's a certain amount of professional courtesy. You don't mess with other people's worlds. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Well, along those same lines, Kimberly could fit in one of the FBI franchise shows that in the US. We could fit in one of those, and especially the original one, the just called FBI. I think she would fit in there quite well. That would be great.
She's much too calm and collected, really, for them. Doesn't shout at people as much enough.
Right. Well, maybe she'd have to bring down the temperature a little bit.
That's my thing. This is like my main beef with modern cop shows at the moment, is that everyone's shouting at each other all the time. It's like, people don't shout at each other like that all the time. They just don't. You know, workplace. You imagine a workplace is actually like that. I've worked in workplaces like that. They don't last very long. You don't last very long. You know, I calm down. Relax,
right.
Man.
At least turn down the volume a little bit. Yeah.
You know,
find a different way to say those things, right?
People have been known to have jobs, go out, get married, you know, or whatever, have relationships, have kids without that much drama. See, and I think what I call the soap operification of particularly British drama is that everything's got to be heightened. Everyone's got to always be in conflict with everyone else all the time, and that annoys me because it's unnecessary. Because I think personally, and this is just my opinion, mystery dramas, right? You don't need a detective to have a life, really. They're not there. They're there to be fun and interesting, but they're not there to have an arc. They're there to inflict themselves on other people. They're there to peel open other people's lives so that you can peer into their lives, right? But they're not really, you know, once you start giving them an arc beyond, you know, they get older and they get kids and things, I think what you're doing is you're just wasting them. You're just burning them out before you need to. I mean, Poirot doesn't exactly change.
Right.
Doesn't change. The guys from the Ed McBain's 87th precinct don't change despite not getting much older over 50 years. You know, it's like
it's a lot of stuff crammed into a short time.
I think they age about 5 years over 50 years, because the first book's like 1964 or something. Cop Killer's like 1964 in the game. I like that, by the way. That is it for me is interesting because that's a secondary fantasy world in some ways, because that's a made up city. He's made up a completely imaginary city for that. I mean, it's based on New York, but it's definitely an imaginary city. And he's made up that city. And that's, for me, that's as much an act of secondary world creation as Middle Earth or Earth, you see. And so for me, that's where I see the kind of the fantasy and crime and that sort of thing. You know, there's a long tradition of that because you have the Wessex stories, you have the Barchester Chronicles, you have all these towns that don't really exist in crime stories because it's more fun to make up your place. And that's the fun. In the same way, it's always fun to make up your own world. You know, I sometimes sit there going, I wish I'd made up my own world. But then London, you know, goes, oh, I have found this weird thing for you. Ha ha! And I go, oh, thank you, London.
Yeah, you're in a place that has too many possibilities of its own. So
everywhere. possibilities. That's what I have learned, because I mean, I went up to, virtually went up to Bayfield. I couldn't get there because there's no public transport that can get you to Bayfield without a car, basically. And I started digging into the history of it. And it was fascinating. It was like, there's all this history. There's that always is everywhere. Atlanta's got a lot of history, like it's all, and you just keep digging and you find fascinating stuff. Personalities pop out. Archaeologists are always digging stuff up.
Right. Now, you had mentioned a little bit ago about Masquerades of Spring and about Augustus. So, and that's coming out September 1st. So everybody needs to be on the lookout for that. Can you give us a little bit of tell us a little bit about the story and about Augustus to get everybody kind of whet their appetites?
Okay, well, I was reading a Cheese and Worcester book, and I realized that Bertie Wooster had the same speech pattern as Peter, right? The same long sentences, the same metaphors that trail off into the distance, the same multiple clauses that go nowhere, And I thought, right, okay. So I thought, why don't I write a kind of pastiche of Woodhouse? And I thought, all right. And then I came up with this idea of this Bertie Wooster, as you know, is always getting into trouble with his aunts, and at one point flees to New York to escape the wrath of his aunts, who he's managed to annoy. And I thought, well, all right, I'll do a story. I'll set it in New York. I'll set it in the 1920s. And of course, Nightingale will be in it, because I wanted Nightingale to be in it. Nightingale was in it right from the start. And I thought, I've got this character. And he's basically, but what would happen if Bertie Wooster had gone to Casterbrook and learnt magic, right? And then had spent his time using it to knock the tops of steel helmets off police officers and champagne in various events, and he's gone to New York to lie low, where he's discovered the Harlem Renaissance is in full swing, right? And he's become very jazz fanatical, because it's very easy for me to write jazz fanatical characters because I've got a jazz fanatical friend, and I can just go, tell me some jazz fanatical stuff, and he goes, aha, that's Andy Carter. He goes, oh, not more jazz fanatical. So I had this character, and as soon as I started doing research, I discovered things like the Harlem Renaissance, but I also discovered very interesting. I don't know if you know the faggot balls. Do you know what the faggot balls are?
No, I don't think so.
No, right. Okay, look up faggot balls, New York, 1920s. Okay, I'm not going to go any more spoilery than that. Okay. But I came across that, and I thought, aha, this will be fun. I'll throw Nightingale and Gussie into the. So Gussie is basically living the life, because he's independently wealthy, living a happy life in New York with his jazz and the nightlife and the Harlem Renaissance and his friends. And one morning, he's woken by his butler, who says, his valet, who says, the redoubtable Beauregard, who says, the young man is here to see you. And who is it? He goes, it's Thomas Nightingale. He says his name is Thomas Nightingale. And it's like, oh, shit. Because Thomas Nightingale at that point is the guy that goes around and gets into trouble on behalf of the Folly, right? He's their troubleshooter. And there's only one reason he'll be in New York, is if there's trouble. He's like, oh, God, I've got to go out and face this. And he gets sucked into this adventure. The Nightingale sucks him into this adventure, and he's basically playing sort of Watson, and although it's not really like that, to Nightingale, and it's fun, and it's the fastest thing I've ever written. I've never written anything that fast. It just seemed to flow out of my pen, metaphorically speaking, because I was typing, and it just fun stuff came in, and it's a really fascinating. I learned a tremendous amount about New York in the 1920s, and I found maps and everything, and it was a lot of fun, And when I visit New York next, I'm going to go look at some of the places. A lot of them don't exist anymore, but I'm going to have a look at some of the places that came up in the plot.
Yeah. See which ones.
And I invented some places, because it wouldn't be a Ben Aaronovich book because I had to burn one down, so I had to invent it because.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you don't want to get in trouble for inciting arson. Yeah. Now, what have you been reading and watching lately that you've really enjoyed?
Well, I've been reading the Eli Griffiths mysteries. She's a crime writer. God, what have I just read? I've been listening to a lot of documentary. I've been reading books about the various. Quite a lot of history books at the moment. A lot of Scottish books about Scottish history and stuff for the book that I've just finished. For pleasure, it's my usual stuff. I mean, I reread me Pratchett, so I have comfort readings. I tend to, when I'm writing, I tend to read comfort books because you don't want something that makes you want to run off and write something else. It's like it's terrible because I read the Murderbot stories, right? The Murderbot Chronicles, and of course immediately I wanted to run off and write a space opera.
Right. Yeah.
You have to be really careful you don't do that. No, I'm writing a novel fantasy. It's not a space opera. Get back to the point in that. So I have to be quite careful. I read a lot of cozy crime. Oh God, I forgot his name. Something Brett. The Charles Paris mysteries, the original.
Oh, yes, I know.
The radio is very good. The radio plays are very good with Nye, but the books are very good as well. And also a really interesting history of British theatrical traditions that are no longer there. The whole repertory thing that he's in that no longer exists, and that was very interesting. Those are very interesting. I'm reading a book called That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, which I'm reading because one of them came because wrong process by which I got to that. It's because I really like the title. The Time I Got Drunk and yeeted a spell at a werewolf, and it's like, and I thought, oh, that's a good title. And then I went back and that was like book 5, so I had to go back and find book 1. So I'm listening to that. Essentially. It's got a very good narrator. What else am I doing? Let me have a look. Yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. I'm back in research mode now, so I'm basically reading research. I'm watching the Jack D mysteries, which is a weird Chinese thing on Netflix.
Wow.
I'm listening to the Annika mysteries, which are
in Glasgow, yeah.
The Stranded. Well, yeah, but there's the original ones on the radio, which I didn't know about.
Oh, okay.
Fun thing to do with the same character, but in Norway. What else? So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm a very boring reader. I've got very shallow taste, really.
No, but it's always interesting to hear what it is that people who write in a particular area, what they enjoy reading for pleasure, I think.
Yeah, the thing is, I have to spend so much time avoiding stuff that's like my stuff because you don't want to go. I mean, either it's really good and you go, "Oh God, this is so good," and my stuff is so bad, or it's really bad and you think, then you steal stuff and that's bad. You shouldn't do that. Or it just distracts you because you go, "Oh, cool, that's an interesting idea. I should go off and do that." So I try not to read. I don't read urban fantasy when I'm writing urban fantasy.
Makes sense.
I read it in the kind of periods in between. Like I read a lot of fantasy, read a lot of science fiction, like space opera and proper science fiction. In between when I'm writing the books, when I'm writing the books, it's much more kind of like guilty pleasures and cozy mysteries and things like that because they don't impinge upon my writing brain. If that makes any kind of sense.
Well, it does, and you said before that it kind of keeps you from going down a rabbit hole yourself and essentially saying, "Oh, that sounds great. I should be doing this." But if it's something that's a comfort read and you know what to expect,
well, but it's not something you're never going to write because I'm never going to. I mean, I'll write quite cozy. My mysteries are quite cozy, but I'm never going to write a kind of like little old lady in a bookshop in Alberta or somewhere. That's just not. I'm not going to ever write. Well, I say I'm not ever going to write that.
Now, as soon as you've said this, in another 6 months, there'll be no, I don't.
Well, no. I mean, I picked up a book that said how to write a romance novel. Of course, immediately I wanted to write a romance novel. It's just, those books are terrible when they go, "Oh, how to write romance novels." Like, "Ooh, romance." Never had an urge to write a romance novel before. Probably not a good idea given things. My descriptive powers don't go in that direction. So it would be a romance between two people who don't never express their emotions, which I suppose would have a niche kind of appeal.
Right. Well, and actually, that's almost a romance trope anyway. So
yeah, but you have to get to the bit where they break out at the end, whereas my characters would go, "Oh, maybe we should go out." Okay, then the end.
It's like everything else, is extraneous.
Yeah, I can't. You have to do that because if the format of that is repression, huge surge of emotion. But if you're not going to do the huge surge of emotion, the repression, it just goes repression, happy ending.
Right,
That's
right.
not,
Which
that's not,
kind of, well, that would probably disappoint
I
some.
wouldn't read that. I'd be annoyed if I read that.
Yeah, and you don't want to write something you wouldn't want to read yourself, right?
That's a cardinal rule of writing, really.
And now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I like a bit of emotion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You want something that people can kind of, maybe not necessarily identify with, but that they can feel affected by. Let's put it that way.
Tearing up at the end of the Bad Batch. I was going, oh, little tear. Good moistened eye at the end of the Bad Batch.
Oh, there you go.
I admit to that. Across me, at least. So what are you asking? You're going to.
Well, no, I was going to say now. Finally, besides Masquerades of Spring coming up September 1st, everyone. And there's a new I think the most recent graphic novel number 12 is also coming in December. Yeah. Is there anything else that we should be on the lookout for from you that you can tell us about?
Well, I've just finished number 10, the Peter Grant book number 10. That's not a novella.
Okay.
Which is set in Scotland, and that's just going to the copy editor now. But that it takes them a year to get this, so that will be out summer 2025.
That's something to look forward to.
I've just started a couple of side projects, and because I have a space opera which I write in kind of like bits between it'll probably never be published, but it's just like it's my yen to have spaceships. I gotta have spaceships.
That's right. You got to do it, and you may as well.
It's not a big epic space opera. It's actually a small kind of like, like that. Well, I forgot her name. Chambers. No,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there are a few different ones. Becky Chambers. Yeah.
Becky Chambers. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is, I was writing this, and I was thinking, no one's going to buy this, right? Because like the galaxy is not in peril now. And then she wrote, A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I realized that actually there was a market for, or rather, my publishers realized there was a market for kind of like space operas that didn't necessarily have the entire fate of the universe at stake. And so maybe it's basically my traveler campaign written down, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled. Who knows? Maybe one of these days, right?
Faster-ish. Okay, faster-ish.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Ben, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you again.
It's been lovely to be here, or there, or in between.
Yes, and I hope that one of these days we will get to see you in person at Dragon Con. Maybe 2025 will hit just right.
Atlanta is nice because it's warm. It will be warm for Dragon Con. Whereas like Boston was not warm. Boston was quite cold.
Right. Well, you might think it's actually a little too warm in Atlanta at the time of year that Dragon Con always occurs, but it's still, it hasn't been as bad in more recent years as it used to be. So it would do nice.
Air conditioning.
There you go. There is such a thing as air conditioning.
I have survived Lagos. I can survive Atlanta. So
yeah.
Lagos is hot. Lagos is ridiculously hot. You literally run from air conditioning unit to air conditioning unit.
Wow.
Yes, because it's just so hot. I mean, that's everybody. The locals as well. Oh my God, it's so hot.
So that's how everybody plans their day, is how to get from one air conditioned spot to the other with the minimum amount of time. That would make sense. There have been days like that around here too. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Please make sure and check out Masquerades of Spring and the other books in the series if you haven't.
If you haven't bought my books, I need the money.
Yeah, there you go. Well, they certainly should be. So again, thank you so much, Ben. Thank you to our viewers. And I will hope to see you again at some point in time, maybe in person.
enjoyable. This is quite painless. It's a pain. I finished work by now. Like 7 o'clock at night here, so I'm not doing anything worthwhile. So I might as well.
Well, the time difference works out just fine then.
Yeah.
So anyway, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.